Last week, Chicago's Magnificent Mile shopping district on Michigan Avenue was overrun with looters. This is a story that has not gotten much play in left-wing media spaces. It's gotten a lot on right-wing media spaces. But here's just a video montage of a little bit, a sampling of what went down there. Here's the Nike store, just in broad daylight here. This is the inside of a Walmart. After it was looted, 4 Walmart locations have now closed down in the city of Chicago. So there you have that. It's just a sampling. Now, when Mayor-elect, he has not taken office yet, but when Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson was asked about this, asked to respond to the looting, he made news by giving the following answer, which did not sit well with a lot of conservatives or even a lot of these sort of centrist, more right-leaning neoliberal Democrats and their media people. So here, let's have a look at what he has to say.
The question is, how do we make sure that people can eat? Look, no one is going to condone, behavior that quite frankly speaks to a level of desperation.
So you're not condoning looting.
I'm saying that people are acting out of desperation. We don't want a society that is acting out of desperation, but you have to pay attention to the cries that people have.
So you're not condoning looting.
There's no way to embrace that. What I'm saying is you can't condone the looting that corporations continue to do every single day when they take tax dollars from black, brown, white folks all over the city of Chicago so that they can turn a profit.
Okay. So what he says there is actually very in line with one of my favorite pieces of George Carlin sound. This was from the Bill Maher show in the wake of Hurricane Katrina and the subsequent looting and all the hand-wringing over looting that went on during that time. Here's George Carlin on the problem of looting in America. It's one of my favorite clips of his.
The real looting in this country takes place in the transfer of the wealth from the poor to the rich. I'm sorry that you don't like class and the truth, my friend, but you were stuck with it. Class and the poor have been systematically looted in this country. The rich have been made richer under this criminal, fascist president and his government.
Talking about, of course, President George Bush. That was back when the cowbell people had a problem with George Bush. But look.
Before Michelle rehabilitated him.
Exactly. I think what Brandon Johnson said there is more or less right on. I don't take issue with really any of that. Now, on a textual level, was this desperation in the sense that were they looting grocery stores for food so they can eat? No. But this is nihilism that is certainly born of a certain despair about the future and a certain detachment to the community that they live in, because the communities that they live in have had their wealth extracted by corporate tenants of the more upscale neighborhoods of those cities. In Chicago, you saw that happen on the Magnificent Mile. In New York City, I would get the question very, very often, as I'm sure Russell did as a tour guide. You'd be walking through an expensive area, or even like Times Square, right, the M&M store, and they say, given the rents in this area, how do the people working at the stores afford to live here? Well, they don't afford to live here. They take the train in from an hour and a half away. You board the L train out in the slums of East New York, and you ride it an hour and a half into Midtown to work a minimum wage job selling bullshit candy to rich tourists who are there on vacation. That is corporate extraction of wealth from the communities. That is a form, yes, as George Carlin said, of looting. This is transference of wealth from the poor to the rich. This is redistribution in the wrong direction. And one quote that I tried to find, and I couldn't find it because there's so much of his stuff online, but Killer Mike went on Bill Maher one time and was asked about looting, and he says, well, the thing you have to understand about looting is that a lot of people in these neighborhoods, they feel as though they are renters in their communities. They don't feel invested in their communities because they don't own any of it. They don't have a stake in any of it. When you rent something, you don't care for it as if it's your own. That applies to a piece of property, whether it be a car or a piece of furniture or a home or a neighborhood. If you don't feel like you have a stake in that neighborhood, that leads to a despair and a sense of nihilism. And the ultimate irony here, because I know that the meme moving forward is going to be that the people who voted for Brandon Johnson voted for this. It's actually the complete opposite. The Brandon Johnsons and the Bernie Sanders, right, for all their faults, right? We're not here, singing the praises of any politician, right? But for all their faults, the people who voted for these candidates are the people who voted to stop this from happening. They are the people who voted to stop this societal collapse that we are witnessing, right? They were the ones who tried to right the ship, and they couldn't, by and large. And it's very, very difficult for a mayor to do what needs to be done, because even a big city like Chicago is only a city. This system needed a major top-down overhaul, which is why I thought those Bernie Sanders campaigns were so important to support. We said throughout them, this is the last chance to pull that airplane up before it crashes into the mountain. If this fails, we're crashing into the mountain. And the question is, how do we survive that, as Nick Cruz put so well when we were on his show? The plane has hit the mountain now. That we are past the point of no return now. And these voters and these media stooges like this here, they want to lay this at the feet of the progressives like Brandon Johnson and the people who voted for him. You see here where they ask him, are you defending looting? Are you defending looting? They're not interested in hearing about his diagnosis of why this is happening or the context in which this is happening. They just keep repeating over and over again, well, you're not defending looting, are you? You're not defending looting, are you? Like, these voters, the people who voted for this are the people who have voted for neoliberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, people who have voted for the maintenance and management of an unjust, unsustainable, and unviable status quo. They are the ones who voted for this collapse. They are the ones who voted for this looting, whether they know it or not. And now they're going to lay it at the feet of these reformers who tried their best in the face of insurmountable odds. And now they're going to say, well, you're not putting enough cops on the street. There are not enough cops on the street to suppress the rage that is coming. There are not enough cops on the street to keep a lid on this because you have pushed it too far. And especially in cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, what are we seeing? We're seeing tent cities. We're seeing crime everywhere because you have concentrated too much wealth in the hands of too few people, many of whom don't even live in the fucking cities anymore. It's literally been sucked out by these global corporations. And you have populations of people who just have no future and no hope for anything. So of course this is going to happen. Of course this is going to happen. And it is absurd to lay this at the feet of these progressive politicians whose policies would have prevented this if they were allowed to gain any traction within the voting public. But no, the voters are going to vote for the same old, and they're going to get petulant about, well, why don't we have enough cops to keep the shoe level? Because it's math. It's math. When you fuck too many people for too many years, it becomes impossible to keep a lid on this. And that's what we're starting to see now, which is what we warned about. That's what we warned about. And so now we're here.
I described when Sanders was running, I told people he's a Hail Mary pass. I didn't even feel that he would necessarily be able to stop the collapse. But I knew that the kinds of policy reforms he was proposing were the only chance we had. And now, yes, we're around that bend. Now we're on the other side of it. Decades of neoliberalism have left people just hopeless and nihilistic. This is a collapse of society. So I want to address this on a few levels. One, you mentioned that this is getting no coverage in left media, and it's not. I think a lot of people don't even know this is happening. They don't even know about it. That's not good. That's not good. We need to talk about this. I understand why they don't want to show it, especially with Tucker on there every night doing his, coded white nationalism thing by showing these videos. You can imagine how he's covering this as evident. And of course, it's John. Well, you voted for this. Exactly. That's how this is all playing in the right-wing media. It is a big mistake, and it's a mistake the libs always make, and we should not make it. When there's an inconvenient event or narrative, or they hide it. We can't do that. We can't do that. That's how you get blindsided by the right-wing narrative, because you don't even know what it is, because your media is not even covering the event that they're talking about. You don't even know that it's happening. That's why the libs are so.
I just went on for a long time there, but I don't even think it's that inconvenient. I think this proves our point. As people on the left, this proves what we were saying, which is we tried to stop this from getting here. Right.
That requires more thought.
Right.
Right. But if you just look at these images, I think a lot of people on the left don't want to cover it because they feel like it's going to stir up racism because of who's in these images are mostly African Americans. And they don't want to talk about it because they feel like it's going to be a rebuke against defund the police movements. But that's already happening. That's not going to go away. You can't argue the other side if you don't acknowledge that this is happening. That's what I mean. They bury their heads in the sand and they don't want to deal with it because they're afraid of what it's going to bring up. And it's already bringing that up. Right-wing media is all over this. They're all over it. Believe me. So you need to look at it and you need to evaluate how we're going to deal with it. So I often, when this comes up...
Sorry, it was an accident.
When this comes up, I often talk about how tricky it is to try to deal with this kind of a situation once it's in full swing, because it is such a potent issue for the right. And as a native New Yorker, I'm particularly sensitive to how much power the police have to shape those narratives. So I'm going to remind you of a little blast from the past. You see, the police, when new Roman emperors were elected, very often they would give 20 gold pieces to all the Roman soldiers, right? They had to get the military on their side. If you remember, and you might not if you're not from New York, right at the height of the George Floyd protests, de Blasio came out, a Democrat, and made it clear that he supports the police, because if you lose the police in New York, they will fuck you. They will fuck you. And this is true on a national level. So let's take a look at what one woman said they told her about when they refused to intervene to help out a couple that was being attacked.
Yeah, so this was a good Samaritan who intervened to help out these two people. And when she talked to the cops about it, she talks about how that conversation went.
Went out into the street and stopped and held my hands up to a police car and asked them to stop and motioned them over to what was going on. And they just cut a path around me and just kept going.
She was eventually able to get the couple into her car. Then she drove them to the police station.
Got told by the desk sergeant that this was going to happen. It was going to keep happening because Brandon Johnson got elected. That floored me.
There you go. This is going to keep happening because Brandon Johnson. So what they're saying is they're doing an Atlas Shrugged move. They're like, all right, fine. You don't like us. We just won't do anything.
Right.
Fuck you.
And so, look, there's a precedent for this. The cops in the 70s did not like the way New York was being governed. They didn't like the police budget. And they very infamously, this is a kind of legendary thing in New York history, they printed up a pamphlet called Welcome to Fear City. And they started going to airports and handing these out to tourists upon arrival to screw the tourism industry in New York, to force the Democrats out, essentially. And, it took some time. Eventually, they succeeded with Giuliani. So we have a graphic of that. This is very, very famous in New York City history. So Welcome to Fear City. The incidence of crime and violence in New York City is shockingly high and is getting worse every day. During the 4-month period ended April 30th, 1975, that is, robberies were up 21%, aggravated assault was up 15%, larceny was up 22%, and burglary was up 19%. So then they have all these talking points. Stay off the streets after 6 p.m., don't walk, avoid public transportation, remain in Manhattan, protect your property, safeguard your handbag, conceal property in automobiles. So this is what I actually, on a larger scale, I was always worried about this if Sanders did get elected, because if corporations and the police that serve them don't like who you elect, they're going to work to undermine your political project. I always worried that if Sanders did get elected, Wall Street would tank the economy just to make sure that people would have negative opinions of his politics and would never vote for anyone like that again. And that very well might have happened. I've said since the George Floyd protests that this was going to happen, that if you defunded the police, because the police are there to brutalize the victims of capitalism, and you don't address the victims of capitalism's material needs, you get an explosion in crime. That's what you're going to get, because they are there to suppress that. And that's what you're getting. It's remarkable, if anything, that it took so long to get here, because wealth has been extracted from certain racial groups, from African Americans, for 400 years. But now it's being extracted from the society writ large. I've talked about this. When I was coming up, I didn't grow up in the New Deal when things were really good, but it was the afterglow. There was still opportunity there. Even though I grew up poor, I grew up on welfare. I didn't feel like there wasn't opportunity for me. I didn't feel like I couldn't get ahead, and I did get ahead. I went at no money, no contacts. I owned 3 theaters of my own that I had made with my own money right in the middle of the East Village. You can't do things like that today. And you broaden that out. What kind of future are you offering people? A future of working in the Walmart? You watch how Tucker Carlson and a lot of the right wingers are covering this. See, Walmart is pulling out. You see that's see what you did. So what are you saying? They should be happy with the minimum wage jobs that Walmart brought them, with no opportunity in the broader. It's bigger than Walmart. You used to be able to save up money, buy a house, right? You didn't have to have some kind of high-flying finance job to afford that. So you had a reason not to riot. You had a reason not to loot.
Sure.
You had some kind of a vision of a future. What kind of a future are you offering them? What kind, and people in general in the society, there are fewer and fewer people on the top and more people on the bottom. And as we did talk about when we were on with Nick Cruz, okay, so now you're having people at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale rioting and losing faith in the system. What's going to happen when AI just makes all of these middle management and even law jobs and paralegal, all these things are going to be obsolete in the next 5 to 10 years. What's going to happen then? Like, capitalism is no longer working for the majority of the population already. And now you're going to have that upper 20% having capitalism not working for them. Who's going to be left? Just the owner class? That's it? That's not sustainable.
Yeah. No, look, you're right. But in the short term, what you have here, I always thought the Occupy Wall Street motto and their sort of framing of this as the 99 versus the 1%, I understand why they use that, right? It's good. It makes for a good poster. But it's really not 99 versus 1. You look at a study that says 62% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. That's the real divide. The real divide is between the 62 who cannot afford $500 when they're in a jam and the 38% who can. That's the real divide, because it's those 31% of the population cannot win elections. They cannot install people in power. They need that petty bourgeois. They need that that sort of wannabe upper class who feel like they are just on the doorstep of fortune. They need them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What's going to happen when it's not working for them either?
Well, we will see.
Who's left?
We will see. But in the meantime, what you have is this is MSNBC.
The whole
this
learn
is
to
CNN.
code, that's about to go out the window.
Oh, sure. No, of course. No, that's
AI can already do it better.
Right. No, I mean, look, that is all coming. There's no doubt that that's coming. But in the meantime, if we're talking about today, what you have here are a bunch of PMC shit libs and or conservatives complaining, whining that the police cannot keep a lid on this or will not keep a lid on this, complaining that the liberal policies of these progressive mayors or DAs, right? San Francisco, they recalled Chesa Boudin. Chesa Boudin tried to do a noble thing, but there wasn't the infrastructure there to do it because, as Russell said, they did not abandon neoliberalism before they pulled back on the cops.
This is what I'm saying.
And that's what he's saying.
You need to provide those opportunities. You need to give people a reason to invest in the society, to be invested in it. You take away the police without doing that, of course you get an explosion in crime. That's what I'm saying. I remember this from when I was a kid. That empowered Giuliani. That brought in Giuliani. That brought in Reagan.
But at this point, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You go back, you look at a lot of, we were talking about this offline. You look at a lot of these movies from the 70s, it foreshadows the Fox News phenomena. There, you got movies like Death Wish that are extremely reactionary, violent fantasies about the lone guy fighting back against this collapse of society and the criminal class. You can see that all coming. It's amazing now. You watch some of that people didn't see that was in the air, that there was this deep desire to take back society from the criminals and take their revenge, with, of course, never addressing the white flight from the cities that had caused this urban decay and this collapse, the redlining that had caused this urban decay and collapse, moving the factories out of the cities. At one time, cities had been manufacturing centers. That's what brought all the immigrants into the cities. They were coming there for those jobs. Not addressing any of that. It's just, it's very much like now. Like they don't want to address the fact that neoliberalism caused that. Back then, they didn't want to address the fact that redlining and white flight caused this urban decay. They very much like now, they portrayed it as a racial issue, right? It's those people, right? But it was effective. That's what I keep trying to impress, that it's very dangerous when you give the right wing the crime issue.
In terms of, being worried about a right-wing backlash, I think in a sense it's time to move past that fear and anxiety, because Chicago just did. Like, Chicago just had a vote. They just elected Brandon Johnson. They had the opportunity to elect Paul Vallis, who would have been the tough on crime big guy, come in and clean up the streets, right? And his answers would have been very, very, very different from Johnson's answers if he were asked that as the incoming mayor.
But as you say, this incoming mayor cannot correct the consequences of 40 years of neoliberal economic policy. So what happens when this keeps happening under Johnson?
No, I understand what you're
who
saying.
do they elect after him?
But this happened under Lightfoot. Not to this extent, but this did happen to a large degree under Lightfoot, and that's what prompted this whole race. That's why she lost her primary, because 63% of Chicagoans felt unsafe. That was a poll that just spelled doom for her. That's why people thought Vallis was going to win, right? But the people of Chicago decided, no, we're not going to go the Giuliani route. We're not going to go the Giuliani route because there are more of us than there are of the Gold Coast, PMC, Mag Mile crowd. And we don't think that what's happening in our city is right. We think the people of our city are being taken advantage of by the corporations who occupy this space. And we're not just going to hand this city over to the police to suppress our feelings about this. Like, they just had an election and Johnson won it. And to an extent, I mean, I said this offline to you earlier. There's the old saying that you see a lot. It's on the Renaissance Fair t-shirts. The floggings will continue until morale improves, right? Like, there is an element of this that I think is consistent with that, which is like, look, we told you this was happening unless we made major systemic reforms very, very quickly. You didn't listen. You called us unreasonable. You called us extremists. You said we weren't pragmatic, right? And so you insisted that your way of managing the society was the most practical and provided the best outcomes for the most number of people. And the world that you ushered in through your decades of voting for the sensible people has wrought this. And we're not going to blink first when you give us a choice between Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson. We're going to go with Johnson because we don't think this is our fault. And you know what? It's not their fault. And the majority of people in Chicago understand that it is not the working class's fault that this is happening. And are there risks associated with voting that way? Are there risks associated with, look, there are all kinds of risks associated when capital flees a city. That creates all kinds of problems, right? Walmart not being there means people are going to have to pay more for their shit because Walmart's not there. You get cheaper shit, right? So this does come with certain risks, but this is why I say the floggings will continue until, like, at a certain point, you have to be willing to stick it out and insist that you're not going to blink first, because you have to just assert that what's happening is not your fault. You have to force systemic change at a certain point. Because otherwise we're just volleying back and forth between two shitty options that, as Russell Brand told Bill Maher, are really just decline management, right? We're really just talking about the slow management of failure, the slow management of decay. And unless you force something different, it's not going to happen. We tried doing this the easy way. We put candidates on your fucking ballots and said, can we please do this the easy way? No. Okay. I guess we're going to have to do it the hard way then. But you can't blink first and turn the keys over to the Eric Adamses or the Paul Vallases. And look, in most cases, the right-wing reactionary Giuliani wins. Absolutely. In this case, they didn't. And now Brandon Johnson has, a 4-year term? We'll see how it goes, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Okay, so 1988, you know who ran against David Dinkins?
Was
Giuliani, and he lost.
Yeah.
You know what happened next time?
I understand.
He won.
I understand.
So that was after years of Koch and all this crime and everything, right? Still elected this hopeful first African-American mayor, David Dinkins. Giuliani lost. And Giuliani actually was a hero, right? Because he put away the mob. He was the first guy who ever took on the mob. He had the squeaky clean image as a U.S. attorney. But after more crime and more urban decay under Dinkins, they elected Giuliani. So that doesn't mean that's what has to happen here. But do you think if there's 4 years of this under Johnson, it's not going to happen? Do you think they're going to reelect Johnson if that continues? So this is what I'm saying, and I'm not blaming him. How could he, as a mayor, fix 40 years of economic wealth extraction from the American population? It is far beyond his power to do anything about it. Just like it was far beyond Dinkins's power, really, to do anything about redlining and the consequences of white flight. Giuliani came in, sent out the cops, and hired so many new cops that to this day, if New York's police force were an army, it would be the world's 11th largest army. Because nobody wants to be the one who cut the police force, right? So now once you let that genie out of the bottle, you're stuck with a police force that size. He sent them out to make New York safe for gentrification. Just drove the homeless out of the parks, beat the living shit out of people, moved the strip clubs out of the tourist areas, and then got the corporations to come in, persuaded Disney to take over 42nd Street, all of that, and, turned it into the theme park version of New York that we have today. But in the end, people did vote for that twice. And then they voted for Bloomberg, which might as well have been a third and a fourth and a fifth voting for that. That is how deep an impression that period made on people in New York. Not only that, Adams owes his mayoralty to the invocation of the Fear City period. That's the flyer I just showed.
I know that. Well,
they kept bringing it up. They kept bringing it up.
I told you that. I just said that. I said, yeah, in most cases they win. Absolutely. Tusker's waiting. Do you want to turn your mic on?
Oh, snap.
We had two nice guys
Tusker's
call.
Commie Clubhouse.
We needed one of our depraved regulars to call in.
Russell, you're right. Like that is the problem, like with like crime and all that other type of stuff. It's the reason why I don't like police brutality. I don't like anything like that. But the abolition movement, they don't know what they're asking for with that.
Right.
It really does. It will lead to more problems. It will create a backlash that I think is
but look, I have to add, we're worried about this backlash as if the plane has not already crashed. The plane has already crashed. The society is already doomed. It's already collapsing. So when we talk about a backlash, what we're talking about is the management of decline by two, superficially different management companies in the forms of liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans. So, what are we worried about a backlash for? This is going one way the wrong way. It's already hit.
My answer would be I don't claim to really have an answer to this conundrum. What I offer is having a unique perspective, I think, in the space, as somebody who came from a city where this played out very infamously, and having seen that up close and what you ended up with as a result. New York used to be great. It used to be great. When I talk about moving, people say, wouldn't you miss New York? I say I miss it every day. What would the difference be?
Right.
That New York doesn't exist anymore. And it really goes back to that pivotal moment where people went for Giuliani.
But is the difference
what he turned this into? And I think now the society is so much more degraded than it was then, as bad as Giuliani and Reagan were. It's just, yes, it's a symptom of the fact that the whole society is collapsing. The type of right-wing backlash you'll get now is going to be really dystopian sci-fi. Like now it's going to make Giuliani look like Mary Poppins, the kind of fascism that you're going to usher in with this backlash.
You're going to get actually existing fascism.
Right. Yes.
That is what you are going to get.
Right. It's not going to be a figure of speech like it was with Giuliani. Right. It's not going to be basically a kind of centrist Republican with totalitarian tendencies. It's going to be like real fucking fascism.
Well, but
I don't know what the solution to that is.
Well, is this not the showdown?
It's a Gordian knot to try to resolve that.
Yeah, but is this not the showdown that's been coming down the pike anyway? I mean, in the 70s, there was a sense that there was something to lose because the society was still a society in the 70s. You still had a social safety net in the 70s that was not what it should have been, but was a hell of a lot bigger and better and stronger than it was now. You still had a level of cohesiveness to the point where you could feel like there was still something worth preserving. At this point,
much better
music, way better music, right? Not even close. But at that point, there was a sense that society was worth preserving, and that the two major parties, these choices that we were choosing between, and the choices that we were afraid of getting on the wrong side of, actually meant something. Whereas now these choices seem ultimately meaningless, to the point where, like, oh, okay, so we're gonna get the real fascists next time. Well, in a sense, this showdown between socialism and fascism has been brewing for a long time. Like, we've been needing to just have that out for a long time. And so what's the point of putting it off any longer once the plane has already crashed? I think what the people of Chicago said was like, look, we're not going to be scared into turning over the city to the cops just because you scared us into what would happen if we don't go in a more progressive direction. Like, sooner or later, we're going to have this battle. Isn't that the point of spaces like this, is to make the case for our side, as opposed to, oh, well, if we go 3 inches in this direction, we're going to lose 5 inches in that direction. All the while we're taking on water, and it's not going to last much longer anyway.
You're right. Yeah. I don't have a solution. What I'm saying is there's a problem.
Of course. Well,
we need to talk about it. Like, we need to. Is there a way to avoid what happened in the past when we tried to liberalize the justice system? Is there a way to avoid, because it was a big part of what ushered in Reagan and everything that came with him? Is there a way to avoid that result this time?
Well, what I would say is that the attempts to create a more equal and more democratic and more cohesive society, those have failed because the system has proven unresponsive to democratic input. And so, like, we tried to fix things first to make crime less prevalent. But we've been rejected. We've been rejected by this same class of petulant 38%ers who want their house and their sidewalk and their lawn and their cops. And they have been completely indifferent to the plight of the 62% who don't have $500 when they need it in case the car breaks down, right? And so at a certain point, if you can't beat them at the ballot box, you have to force the issue in other ways. And that means in places like Chicago, it means not blinking first. It means not it means not giving in to the ultimate despair, which is perpetuation of the status quo. It's not being willing to lose 3 feet because you think the other party's going to gain 4, right? To me, that just seems like a back and forth that is ultimately meaningless, because ultimately the society at large is just going one way the wrong way.
Well,
and it seems irreversible at this point.
Tusker, do you want to say something?
I mean, I think the thing that I would have to say, and fine, since I've already outed myself on the last show and Russell repeats it every single time he says my name, what it is that people with my ideology have evaluated.
You can say I'm not anti-communist. You can call yourself.
I'm
not problem with communism.
But the only thing that I'm saying is, do you want to know who we blame the most?
Communists.
No. Do you want to know who we blame the most?
What's that?
We blame social democrats the most. That is who we have historically been the hardest on. We do not. That is who, year after year after year after year. Who do we fight? We fight the petite bourgeois left. We fight the AOCs. We fight the Sandersers. We fight, you know why? Because every single time in Italy, in Germany, in every single country where capitalism reorganized itself with the iron fist of fascism to regain its power and smash the dissident masses, what has happened is you had a weak left. You had a weak social democratic left that wouldn't fight. That is what has happened historically. That is what has happened in every single country. That's the reason why your show attracts people like me, because we recognize who it is that you're fighting and who your attention is turned on. And that's the reason why it attracts people like me, because we know that you are actually fighting the correct enemy. That's why I'm here. And if the left doesn't get its crap together, you want to talk about aesthetic fascism, where people are making 3% signs and stuff like that. Fascism is not an aesthetic.
No,
It is
I
the
agree with you.
mode of capitalism that smashes dissidents and reorganizes itself
Yeah.
into its dominance and maintaining its system of order over the masses. That is what
we're there.
fascism
We're
is.
there. I mean, that's I think all the censorship stuff we've been talking
Exactly.
about is part of that. And ultimately, yes, when I see the liberals cheering for every new speech restriction, I'm amazed at the stupidity. Like, you guys are usually not able to win elections, so it shouldn't really be hard for you to imagine what's going to happen once you put all this in place and the fascists really take over. You're already going to have built all the infrastructure that they need to assert a kind of control over society that no totalitarians or fascists have ever had at their disposal before.
But that's kind of what I'm saying is you have this left that calls fascism everything. And,
Right.
there is, we can go with the Mussolini definition of fascism as the merger between corporations and state.
Mhm.
But actually, the theory has been developed beyond that.
Oh, sure,
So-
of course.
So capitalism itself is the merger of corporations and state. Capitalism is the dictatorship of capital.
Right, of course.
Capital already owns your fucking democracy.
Right.
It's not a democracy because they own it. They will take your rights away exactly whenever it is that they want. You don't have rights. You absolutely have none of them. Everyone can sit here and be like, oh, our free speech rights. You don't have them.
Of
You've
course,
never
right.
had them. You live in an authoritarian society. They will take it away from you whenever it is that they want. It's just you're allowed to have the illusion of freedom as long as you're not thinking, as
Sure.
long
No,
as
I
you're
agree.
not aware. But the
Of course.
second that people wake up, they'll take away your rights. You don't actually have rights. That's not a thing. You don't have them. They don't belong to you. They belong to your dictatorship.
Sure.
And that's what people are not like. It is just the left has a very weak understanding of what this is, of what it is that we're living under.
Because I mean, this modern incarnation of the left, and I shouldn't call it a modern incarnation, but I think the American left, I think there's a tendency among Americans to assume that these structures, right, these constitutional ideals are just permanent, right? They're just a given. They're not the product of human beings that can then be taken away by other human beings or undermined or just defied outright, as the cowbell waving moron's favorite president now did in broad daylight. So yes, no, I think you're right about all that.
It's such an idealist point of view to sit there and think that you can appeal to your overlords with, oh, but our basic human decency, and don't you believe in these things? They don't.
Of course.
No, they've never believed in them.
No, of course.
Ever.
I agree with you. I agree with you. No argument here.
And
no
so,
argument here.
like,
So then
to
in terms of this
rely
current
on-
conflict then, so then how would you, okay, so then, all right, so let's take that. And then let's talk about Chicago.
Okay.
What do you do in Chicago?
in that particular situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, just given what you said there, right? Like, I'm with you on all that, right? So now how do you actually apply that to, like, okay, we're living in Chicago. What do we do? Because my point is that my point is kind of similar to yours, which is that you're going to have to force this confrontation sooner or later. You're only going to be able to toss the hot potato between dog shit Democrats and dog shit Republicans for so long. At a certain point, you reach collapse. You reach nothing. At a certain point, you're in shambles, right? And neither of those options, now they're really meaningless at that point. So then what do you do?
Look, I mean, and Russell, you might not think it's popular, you might disagree with me, but I think you have to look to places that beat their capitalist class. Like,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No, look, I don't think you're wrong about that either. But how do you get there? Do you get there by management of decline? Do you get there by being afraid, well, we can't have people looting Nike stores for 3 years because then we're gonna get a Republican mayor?
Well, what I can tell you is what that movement, I mean, what that movement looks like, what is happening in that's Narodnerism. That's Narodnerics. That is what that movement was. It was spontaneity of action without an organized political mass movement. That was spontaneous terrorism, and it's spontaneous action. It is the anger and rage of the masses that are acting out of spontaneity, which people may be able to justify, but it doesn't actually get anything done. And it actually defeats you whenever you engage in those actions. So whenever people are engaging in that, I understand the anger, and I understand the frustration. And I understand people kind of saying like, well, I'll let that go. No, that is not that is not organization. You know, it's not. And part of it is I'm sorry, everyone. You can't just watch YouTube shows. You're going to have to join a local party, a local affiliation, an organization. You're going to have to go out and start talking to people. You are going to have
these things cannot happen in this current climate that we're in. I mean, that's part of what we talked. I know you didn't catch the whole show this evening, but we talked about the African socialists at the top of the show. Like, they will just the system as it is now will not allow for the kind of movement building that you're talking about, which is all the more reason to force the issue, right? The floggings will continue until morale improves. You have to force the issue, because as long as people are under the illusion that there is a society worth saving, they're not going to do anything big. They're not. It can't happen. It won't happen. Because and at the top, obviously, the people who are presiding over that right now will stop that from happening if and when it does attempt to get off the ground.
That's because I think that what we're kind of in is more of a 1903. I think that right now we're reaching a tipping point, and there's potentially going to be a 1905 moment where we have a failed movement. And then people will get more serious and reorganize. I mean, I feel like the left is just like, that's what I'm saying. I don't have the answers either. I not totally. I mean, the only thing I can do is I can just tell people you can't just sit online. You can't.
Well, would it make you feel better to know that Marianne is crushing it on TikTok?
Crushing it on TikTok?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let me get rid of this.
Does that change your mind on anything? Yeah. Does that persuade you?
Let me get rid of all of it. Marianne's
all right. So there's what I would say, Tusker.
Yeah.
If you look at countries that have beat their capitalist class, as you're, we know which countries you're intimating, it's an argument against the idea that communist revolutions work. I would not want to live in those societies. I don't think you'd really want to live in those societies. So that is not really a solution. And this is where I'm sympathetic to the libertarian argument. And I'm not a libertarian, but I see where they're coming from when they say, why do you want to give the state more control? Look how fucked up these human institutions are as it is. You really want the state to take over? Now, we'll always say, well, the reason you haven't had a democratic communist country is because of Western interference. They would be. I don't believe that. I think you have to force people to live that way. And that alone makes it a system that is not workable over the long term. China has had to reform its system. It was not able to stick with that strict communism. So anywhere it's been tried, it does not work. And I know that can trigger some leftists because you have the extreme right-wing version of that where they'll ignore the idea that capitalism hasn't really worked in a lot of respects. I would argue that it has worked better than where they have tried communism. And ultimately, yes, we are seeing a kind of rehabilitation of Marx's ideas because the world that we're living in today is such so clearly matches his description of what late stage capitalism would look like. But Jesus Christ, man, when I talk to the people I know in the political space, I wouldn't trust these motherfuckers to run a lemonade stand, much less a society. These are the last people I want deciding how to distribute resources. It's just, if you look at
that's one of the things that drives me crazy. The whole entire idea of billionaires shouldn't exist. Like, have you read, like, have any of these so-called leftists ever read Marx? Marx is not against wealth, but that is not at all what Marx is against. Marx is against the control of wealth over political matters.
Right.
Which is very difficult to avoid once you have unequal wealth. But when you start to try to create a communist society, you very quickly wind up with a cure that's worse than the disease in many respects. You know, being a couple of loudmouth, smart-ass Jews, I don't think we would do very well in societies like that. As somebody who is extremely anti-authoritarian, just common sense. You cannot have a communist society without a very, very strong and very overweening central state. I don't like that idea. I don't want to live in a place like that. I would not last very long in a place like that.
Power is a problem. Power is a permanent problem.
Right. It's a problem.
Power will always be a problem, and it will always be. It will always be unsolvable, and every society will always fail. Every society will always dwindle and die.
That's true as
right?
well.
Like that's what you have to understand. There is no utopia. There is no magic theory of society that will ensure its continual prosperity. That's just not how societies work. It's not how organisms work. It's not how things work. And everything organic dies. That's the thing you have to remember. Everything that's organic dies, which means that it's all doomed. And people say this is being hopeless. No, it's not being hopeless. There's nothing to fear about that. That's just natural. That's just what it is.
Go through cycles.
Right. There are cycles. Exactly. And so the question is not how do you usher in a utopia. The question is how do you manage the natural life cycle of a thing, whether it is a city-state, a state, a society, a culture. How do you manage the life cycle of a thing in a way that affords people the maximum amount of peace and solace and well-being, right? And autonomy and freedom, right? I mean, we have to decide which values we weigh over others. That's where democracy ought to come into play, right? Because you have to say, okay, how much do we want our personal freedom infringed upon to guarantee a certain level of well-being, right? That's a question that the society has to answer. But you have to understand that however you answer it, you're going to die. It's going to, at some point, fail. And at a certain point, it will no longer exist. You're never going to get to a point where you create the thing that works, right? Well, communism doesn't work. Well, capitalism doesn't work. Nothing works. People don't work. We're all dying now, right?
And the thing
so you just have to let go of that.
The thing that is a huge difference, from what I'm kind of back whenever we made the transition from feudalism to capitalism, you really don't think that there was a whole lot of authoritarianism and repression, and there was a whole lot of murder and all of the violence and all of the things described. Right. But that's what I'm talking about. Whenever systems are fighting themselves to essentially be able to create human progress and to be able to move into a system that can sustain the amount of people that we have on the planet, that is what is happening. We are trying to reorganize human progress into a different economic system that capitalism cannot sustain. And it's causing poverty, unrest, and all that other type of stuff. Who's going to fight against it? The people that have power. And they are going to create a lot of that violence and a lot of that other type of stuff. And guess what? It's going to get a reaction. It happened from feudalism to capitalism. It happened from slavery to feudalism. Every single moment you had the people in power that fought with each other, and it created a lot of that type of stuff. And you know what? It would be great if capitalists would just nope, never mind. We give up. Go have your socialist utopia. They're not going to do that. They're never going to do that.
I have long felt that you're going to wind up with one of two futures.
Yeah.
You're going to wind up with the Star Trek future, where you have so much material prosperity generated by technology that you live in a kind of almost libertarian communism where everybody has what they need. And you just go self-actualize, right? You're either going to wind up with that, or you're going to wind up with, nobody ever thinks of it as a political film series. But the premise of Aliens was basically that the corporations had become the government, and they had their own military.
Right.
And it's going to be one of those two things, in my opinion.
Right.
It's either or. So
or you can just,
the
or you
communist thing is like the Star Trek thing.
Yeah, or you can just watch like what is it? It's a John Carpenter film called They Live. Have you guys ever seen that one?
Well,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's political horror to me.
Right.
But to me, that's just like what we live in right now.
That is what we live in now. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we have now.
And you have a bunch of people thinking they're free and they're not.
Please clap.